video. We're talking about the double brood mania, this huge emergence of periodical cicadas that we're experiencing here in 2024. As an entomologist, it warms my heart. I love the idea of billions of bugs coming up out of the ground, but I know for other people, that sounds kind of like a horrifying prospect. So I wanted to talk about what exactly is happening, what these insects are, and then also talk about, for the Kentuckians that tuned in, specifically talking about what we expect to see in this state this year in 2024. So that's just one of the common questions that I'm going to get today. I'm also going to talk about how this is special, how this is different than normal cicada business that you might encounter. I'm going to talk specifically about what periodical cicadas are, how we differentiate them from all of the other cicadas. Also want to talk about broods themselves. Brood sounds like a vaguely science fiction kind of thing, but I'm going to talk about how the broods were sort of invented, and then what is a double brood emergence? What does that look like here in the United States? When and where are we going to expect this in Kentucky? Why they do things in 13 and 17-year patterns? Why do they sing so loud? Why are they so noisy? Why are they like your upstairs neighbors in your apartment complex? And then aside from being loud, are there any issues that we associate with these? There was some joking before about this is the cicada apocalypse, the cicada geddon. Is this really going to be that terrible? Are they going to mow through all of our crops? Just sort of dissect some of the actual biology that they have in regards to that. I keep hiding the floating beating controls. I hope that's okay. So we're going to go through all of these different things, but I wanted to start with some basics. So the basics are, this is an emergence of what we call periodical cicadas. Periodical cicadas are related to all other cicadas, but they are a part of a specific genus that we call Magicicada, which I think is a very evocative name. And basically, this is one that you see here. This is what they look like. Like all cicadas, they hold their clear see-through wings in a tent-like fashion over their abdomen. They have kind of a cigar-shaped body with thin, sort of wispy antennae on the head, and then the big bulging eyes. What makes these look a little different than other cicadas would be their jet black body, their bright red eyes, and then kind of the orange trim that we see on the wings and on the legs. The other special thing that is evoked by their name, periodical, is that they only periodically emerge, either every 13 years or every 17 years, depending on the species. This is the longest lived insect in North America, and it is it's the only rival globally to the termite queens that can live to be 25 years old or so. This insect is one of the titanic ones in terms of just how long they can survive. So as a nymph, as a baby cicada, they live in the soil, they live in tree root zones and feed on sap from the tree roots there. And then there's a queue that we'll talk about at 13 and 17 years that sends them above ground as the adults, which we see in this picture. Within the genus Magicicada, there are 7 total species. 3 of them are 17-year cicadas, and you can see those 3 species here in the palm of this person's hand. A lot of these images come from cicadamania.com. If you want to check that out on your own time, they have a lot of really cool resources that can help people understand this. But one thing I wanted to point out with this image, you can see there are some size differences, but more importantly, sort of for our visual identification, there are different color patterns that emerge on the bottom of the abdomen that help us to separate these species out. And then importantly for the cicadas themselves, they sing differently. They make different noises, and they don't respond to one another's noises. And that's what helps to create these species. So they're not mating with one another. They only respond to the correct song. And I just wanted to show you these 3 different species and some tricks if you wanted to ever identify them. This is Magicicada septendecim. That name just means 17-year periodical cicada, basically. They're the largest of the species. If you look at them on the bottom side of their abdomen, they have mostly an orange abdomen, kind of these bright orange bands with thinner black areas. They also have an orange rectangle between the eye and where the wing kind of attaches to the shoulder. The other thing with these, I'm not going to do a lot of cicada impressions for you here today. I think that would make for terrible webinar radio. But this one I can kind of do. This one is also known as the pharaoh cicada because when the males are calling, they sort of sound like this, like pharaoh. And when we hear it, it sounds like a person sort of trying to talk about the leaders of ancient Egypt. So that's how they get one of their common names. The other thing is just the underside of the abdomen. That's mainly what we use. This is their cousin, Magicicada cassinii. This is also known as the dwarf periodical cicada. So that name kind of implies that they are smaller, as you might can tell from the fingers on the other side here. They have all black abdomens. They make a really loud bursting call followed by some clicks that you can listen to online if you would like. I'm hopeful that later on when I get to them, I will be able to share the sounds, but you'll be able to listen to some of these. But yeah, I'm not going to do impressions of all of them. This is Magicicada septendecula. Their name just means the little 17-year cicada. They are similar in size to the cassinii, but they have all black abdomens with these kind of thin orange stripes that you can see on the banding here on the left. And they make a very tickish kind of call, tick, 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 over and over again as they're preparing to call. That leads us to the 13-year cicadas. So 13-year cicadas, just like their 17-year cousins, they live a lot of their life below ground as a nymph that you see on the screen here that's going to come above ground. Instead of 17 years, they're going to do it at 13 years. This arose in the southern United States because the climate is warmer. We believe that this is what led to the kind of splitting off of these 13-year cicadas as their own group of species. So this is going to have very familiar sounding names. The names are based on the 17-year varieties that they're most closely related to. So we start with Magicicada tredecim. This is the 13-year cicada. Just like the septendecim, their abdomen is very orange. In this case, it's almost completely orange. Some call it caramel or caramel colored. I don't want to ruin foods for you, so I won't necessarily continue to use food analogies, but you can see that kind of coloration on the underside in this image. They have a really close relative that's actually the newest periodical cicada species that's been discovered. They're Magicicada neotredecim, or the new 13-year cicada. This also has mostly orange abdomens with these kind of black rectangles that you see here. But between these two species, they sing differently. And this wasn't discovered until 1998 and confirmed in 2000 by some periodical cicada researchers that were listening to the calls and analyzing them. And they figured out that there was this kind of hidden new 13-year species kind of blending in with the other one. We've also got Magicicada tredecassinii. This is the 13-year version of cassinii. They also have an underside that's all black. These ones make sort of a static-like call in the trees. It's much buzzier and fuzzier compared to the other cicada calls. The last one is Magicicada tredecula, aka the little 13-year cicada. Again, all black abdomens with thin orange stripes like the septendecula also make a ticking call, very similar to these. So after introducing the species, I wanted to sort of compare them to the annual cicadas that perhaps you're more familiar with. Every year when we talk about these, when it happens, we have some Weisenheimer somewhere that kind of says, oh, I don't understand why you are pretending like this is a big deal, why you're saying they only come out every 13 or 17 years. I see or hear cicadas every year. And that is true. You do see and hear cicadas every year. Those are the annual cicadas. That's a distinct group within the cicadas. They do appear every year. I just want to point out that they also have an exaggerated life cycle, though. They live below ground as nymphs for 2 to 3 years, but they have so many overlapping generations that we see them every summer or fall. They tend to be green, brown, and black, as opposed to that black and red that we talked about before. And these cicadas are much larger when compared to periodicals. Their bodies are bigger and bulkier, their wings are longer, and they're more associated with the latter part of the year. So summer and autumn tends to be when they come out. We have species called the dog day cicada because they come out during the dog days of summer. We've also got harvest flies, which fly around and sing when the farmers are out in the field harvesting. This is a different time frame than the periodical cicadas, which are imminently about to come out here in late April or early May. So lots of differences there that help to separate these out and point out that periodical cicadas are special. In terms of what's happening this year, we have 2 broods coming out at the same time. And this is not necessarily impossible to have, but it is relatively rare. I think the last time it happened was 11 or 12 years ago. So it's not super common to have 2 broods come out at the same time. And it's even less common to have 2 broods come out that cover so much of the United States. So this year we have brood 13 and brood 19. And I'll go into more details about these here in a moment. But the geographic footprint of this double brood emergence goes from southern Wisconsin all the way down into the southeastern Atlantic states, into the Carolinas and even deep into Alabama and Georgia. So that's a large swath of the country that's going to have cicadas coming out. And this pair, due to the fact that we're talking about prime numbers with 13 and 17, this pair hasn't lined up like this since the year 1803, when Thomas Jefferson was president, and he was actually completing the Louisiana Purchase, which introduced some of the states that are going to be affected by this double emergence into the Union, or into the burgeoning United States, I should say. So it's a very unique situation. It does sort of evoke these cicada apocalypse or cicada-geddon feelings, but hopefully by the end you'll recognize it's kind of a beautiful and interesting thing that maybe we should appreciate more. So I want to talk about brood 13 first. And I've heard the complaints. Brood 13 is a brood of 17-year cicadas rather than 13-year cicadas. It's just the way the naming worked out. But these are cicadas that were born back in 2007. That was when their eggs were laid and they first hatched and went into the ground. This is a mural of 2007 from Wikipedia. It's the year the iPhone came out. So if you're an iPhone user, these cicadas are the same age as your favorite phone brand. We also had the inklings of the housing crash that was going to happen in 2008, started to occur in 2007. It wasn't the cicadas' fault. I want to put that out there, but it was happening at the same time that they were born. Brood 13 is known as the Northern Illinois brood. This is a historical map from 1922. The man who invented the broods, his name was Charles Marlatt, and this is data that he accrued back in the early 1900s. And so he was saying that they appeared to be in Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, as well as possibly in other states like West Virginia and Kentucky. We have since sort of said that that's not the case. They're not in Kentucky, West Virginia, or Michigan, either locally extinct or they never were a part of it. But they are localized in kind of this Great Lakes region. So that's going to happen up there. Here in Kentucky, we are going to be more confronted with brood 19. Brood 19 is a brood of 13-year cicadas. It is known as the Great Southern Brood because it covers a large swath of the southern United States. So from Virginia all the way out west to even Oklahoma. Again, this is a historical map. This one's from 1907. So some of these are a little different now, but mostly this is the coverage that we see. If you look, you'll notice that Kentucky out in the Purchase and kind of Green River or Pennyroyal region has lots of dots. This is historical data. As of the last emergence in 2011, we only had 4 confirmed counties in Kentucky with periodical cicadas: Allen, Caldwell, Christian, and Trigg. Some of you may be tuning in from those counties here today or work in those counties. This doesn't mean that they aren't in other counties. It just means nobody reported it. And I'm going to talk about ways that you can contribute to cicada data here in a few minutes, but you can help us to better map this out and understand where they actually live here. So these, again, were born in 2011. 2011, the video game Minecraft came out. We saw the beginning of the Occupy movement happening in the United States. And that was the year that Osama bin Laden was killed by the United States, not by the cicadas. Again, I want to squash that rumor, but this is some of the historical events that were happening back in the day. So this is the brood that will be emerging here in Kentucky. Brood 19 is only one of the several broods that live in Kentucky. We actually have quite a few periodical cicada broods in the state of Kentucky. One of the more famous ones is brood 14. You'll often see these listed out by Roman numeral. So brood 14 is XIV. We'll talk more about that here in a second because they will be emerging next year. But we have the Great Southern brood in Kentucky, brood XIX. We have brood XXII, which is 22. That's one of the smaller broods. It only exists in Ohio, Kentucky, and then Mississippi and Louisiana. We've got brood 23, which is another 13-year brood that's in Western Kentucky. These are just a few of them. There's others that touch the state, including brood X. You may remember that emergence back in 2021. So the next one that's going to come out is brood 14 in 2025. It covers a lot of Kentucky. In fact, I would say that it predominates Kentucky over comparisons to other states. So I'm going to be pushing next year to call this either the Bluegrass brood, the Kentucky brood, probably avoid Wildcat brood. That would make people in Louisville mad. Maybe the Bourbon brood. That has sort of a nice ring to it. It comes off the tongue really well. I just want to highlight to people that we're going to see that group of cicadas come out really strongly next year. There's going to be some confusion this year because sometimes cicadas miscount and they come out a year early. So we could see cicadas in some of these regions east of the Pennyrile, east of the Purchase region that happened this year, but they're not truly a part of brood 19. We would need to drill down and identify them as one of the 17-year species that lives in brood 14. So I know that's kind of confusing. I also keep saying the word brood over and over again, and I just wanted to show that broods are simply the groups in which we place cicadas by their emergence year. So the brood is not necessarily based on the species. The brood is based on the years in which they come out. So there's all of these sort of connected broods that are coming out on these 13 or 17-year cycles. And since they happen separately, we're able to place them in these different groups. Currently, in the modern United States, we have 12 groups of magic cicadas with 17-year life cycles, and then only 3 groups of magic cicadas with 13-year life cycles. Charles Marlatt, when he conceived this, he estimated that there would be 17 17-year broods and 13 13-year broods. We never quite reached those numbers. We have lost some broods. Some of them have gone extinct over time due to urbanization and increased farmland. But these are the ones that we still have left. You can see some of these maps online from groups like the Cicada Research Project up at UConn. So a brood is simply a cluster of these species that are coming out in a given year. That's the way that we separate them out. If you want to help better understand where cicadas are in Kentucky and what species we have in the state, there is a citizen science app called Cicada Safari, where if you see a periodical cicada in the next month, if you can snap a photo and upload it into this app, there will be a geotag. It'll tell them where you saw it. A scientist will verify the cicada sighting, and then they will add your data to a new map. And we can update what we know about Kentucky and keep things nice and fresh so that when we give talks like these in another 13 years or 17 years, we'll have really accurate information. You will help to be a guardian of time, just like the cicadas, and help future generations to know better where they can go and experience this. So it's in the App Store, both on Android phones and on Apple phones, and it's free. It is sometimes a little clunky to use, but once you get signed in, it's very easy to upload your pictures. They don't keep your information or anything like that. They just want to know where the cicada photograph was taken. So please, I encourage you, even if you're outside of Kentucky, to do this to help your local entomologist know better what cicadas live there. So some other questions that we get about these include things like, why do they take so long? Why does it take them 13 or 17 years to develop? The first thing that I will say is that they don't eat a very nutritious diet. They're feeding on tree sap, so they're not getting a lot of nitrogen. They're not getting a lot of amino acids. It's mostly sugar water. And so first off, it's going to take a while. We already see that with the annual cicadas that take 2 or 3 years. With these species, it seems that it just got pushed further and further to these weird prime numbers of 13 and 17, because doing that allows them to avoid any predators or parasitoids in terms of having specialization. So there is no predator that only eats periodical cicadas. There is no wasp or fly that only lays their eggs in periodical cicadas because they're too infrequent to rely on. We could talk about the fungus that specializes on them in a little bit if you want, but by and large, we don't see any of these predators or parasitoids feeding on them. This includes the cicada killer wasp. Cicada killers do not use periodical cicadas. The time doesn't match up for their emergences, and these would just be far too infrequent for a wasp to base their whole life on. How do they know if 13 or 17 years have passed? I don't want to say they understand. They're able to log sort of the passage of time by the ebb and flow of the tree sap in the roots. So as winter and summer go back and forth, that food resource will change. And this is the cue. And after 13 or 17 of these cues, their brain understands that it's time to start going up, and they're starting to emerge as adults. Why do they come out in these huge numbers? People are talking about billions. Some people are saying trillions of insects that are going to come out. We call this predator satiation. It's basically you throw waves and waves of your own species at things that eat you, and then eventually they get sick of eating you and they stop doing it. And some of your fellow cicadas are going to survive. So turkeys are one thing that likes to eat cicadas. They are a big protein pack that they can slurp up while they're out in the field. We see this with squirrels, dogs, raccoons, snakes, other insects, spiders, possums, foxes. They will gorge themselves on the first cicadas that come out, but then the ones that come out in late May or early June, they're going to have a higher chance of survival because everybody will be tired of cicadas. It's like when you eat pizza 5 days in a row, you never want to see another Pizza Hut sign again. It's the same process, just with cicadas and wildlife. So what have they been doing underground? They've mainly just been feeding on this tree sap and kind of waiting for their time to come above the ground. So 13 or 17 years, there are teenage bugs that are coming and burrowing up. And the mass emergence usually begins in May and then lasts through June. You can still see some in July, but it's really trailing off by that point. The timing can change based on the climate in an area. So it begins when the temperature 8 inches deep in the soil reaches 64 degrees Fahrenheit. This coincidentally lines up with the phenology of iris flowers. When iris flowers are in full bloom, that tends to be when the periodical cicadas start to come above ground. When they do leave the soil, they will leave small holes behind. You'll see sort of this Swiss cheese hole puncture all over your lawn if they're in your lawn or at the park. You may also see cicada chimneys. These are these mud tubes that you can see on the left here that they'll start piling and piling up as they're getting ready to emerge. It keeps them nice and moist and cool. And then when they're ready to come out, they'll drill a hole in it and emerge above ground. Kelly Jackson, one of the hosts of Horticulture Wednesday here, he sent me a cool video yesterday when we were chatting through email. And this is a video of periodical cicadas preparing themselves out in Christian County, one of the confirmed counties for the state. They are coming up and making these tunnels. You often will find them under patio or under pavers in the landscape, under logs in the landscape, sort of ornamental rocks. They will first sort of cluster there and build these tubes and tunnels and then start to emerge out from there. When they come out, that's usually at night. They're going to find a sort of secluded place so they can shed their last nymphal exoskeleton. That's what you're seeing this one do in a time-lapse image, or time-lapse video, I should say. This takes hours for them to accomplish. It's a very prone position. They are soft and unmelanized when they first come out, so they're squishy and white, and then they will harden into that black color that we showed earlier. So they're easy to eat at this point. They're easily damaged by other cicadas touching them or by things trying to nip at them. And so they want to be somewhere kind of private as they accomplish this. Once they're fully molted, they will take to the upper canopy of trees. The adults, after all of that living underground as a 13 or 17-year-old teenager, they only get to be grown-ups for about 4 to 6 weeks as an individual. They don't really eat as adults. The adults only exist to mate. They are there to sing, and they are there to find one another, and they are there to put on some berry white and make the next generation of periodical cicadas. The male cicadas are the ones that sing. They are the ones that produce all of that noise that they're famous for. And the females don't. They don't sing. They can create a wing flicking noise that will tell a male, I accept your proposal, I accept your mating proposal, and we can proceed. But other than that, she doesn't make any noise. The males are able to make this noise because their abdomen is mostly hollow, and they will flex. You can see it in this little video on the left here, that kind of silvery colored muscle, that's called a tymbal. They will flex the tymbal, it generates a click. The click reverberates around the hollow inside. They can release the noise after they've made it kind of echo around inside of themselves, and it's quite loud. It can reach around 100 decibels. So they rival lawnmowers and jet airplanes when they start singing all together. The first noise that they make is called a call. So I'm going to optimize this to share sound. This is the call for attention. I hope somebody will tell me if the noises don't come through. But this is, so they fly to the tree and they say, all right, bros, come join me in this tree. We're going to start singing. It's going to be awesome. And we'll all make a band together. So I was giving people time to prepare, maybe turn down their headphones if they had to. So that's the Pharaoh one. This is him saying, all right, come to my tree. It's the best tree. It's the greatest tree. And we'll start singing here. Once they get together, they will chorus in a group. So the male cicadas will start to sing with one another, and it creates a really loud chorus call to attract the females to the tree. So you can hear it kind of pulsating. It can be really, really loud when you're standing next to it. It can be hard to hear people who are hanging out with you. And then after they finish with the chorusing, we will have the courtship call. The courtship call is when a male has found a female that they want to mate with. They will sing a courtship call to try and woo her, essentially. I assume it's the cicada version of Wonderwall or something to that effect, and it must be very romantic in order to attract the female. So you can hear the love, you can hear the romance, I think, in this courtship call. Well, we'll move on to the distress call. So this is the final noise that they can make. If you pick one up, they'll yell at you. And it sounds very angry, I think. If some of these didn't come through, or if they didn't sound quite right to you, you can find these at Songs of Insects online, and at Cicada Mania and other places like that. They have recordings of all of these noises as well. Once the mating is complete, the female will begin egg laying with her ovipositor. So the male usually dies once the mating is complete. Then the female will fly around and she lays between 400 and 600 eggs using her sword-like ovipositor, which you can see in the image on the right here. It is a sword-like object that they use to slice into the thin bark of twigs on trees. She will lay batches of about 24 eggs during each sort of slit that she cuts into the tree. So that's a lot of slits that she has to cut to disgorge 400 to 600 eggs. That slit that she makes, you can peel it back and you'll see the rice-like eggs hidden inside of the twigs. If the tree is hit with enough cicadas, the twigs may start to weaken and break, and you'll see flagging. We'll see these brown sort of bits of twig hanging from branches in the tree. Sometimes they fall all the way to the ground. That helps when the eggs hatch. The cicadas can just crawl out and get into the ground very easily. But if it doesn't fall out of the tree, the baby cicadas, when they hatch, they have to crawl down from the treetops to the ground below. They've been reported to lay their eggs in over 80 different kinds of trees. Some of their preferred hosts include elm, chestnut, ash, maple, and oak. They also like fruit trees. The big trees that we have sort of out in the wild or in our landscape, they can suffer through a lot of cicada egg laying and be just fine. But newly transplanted trees in the landscape, if you have a brand new oak or maple and you live in the counties with periodical cicadas, it might be something to pay close attention to. They can get so much egg laying on them that we see that tree suffer during a very prone period. They take about 6 weeks to hatch before they go down to the ground. These are really new cicada nymphs that you see here. And then they burrow into the ground and begin the long wait towards adulthood. So they have 13 or 17 years in front of them of feeding down in the soil. If you want to avoid that damage that I was just alluding to, you can wrap netting with holes less than half an inch around the top of your smaller tree, and then kind of band it down on the upper trunk to keep the adult females from being able to land on the tree twigs and oviposit into those small twigs at the top. You'll probably have to put that on as soon as you hear them singing, and then you leave it on the tree for about 6 to 8 weeks. You take it off usually towards the end of June. Some people report online that they've wrapped tinfoil around the base of the tree and they've kept the cicadas from crawling up it. Other people have used sticky glue. They've sprayed tanglefoot or other sticky stuff onto the trees to capture the cicadas and prevent them from egg laying. But the netting to me is kind of the most simple and elegant solution that we have. The final question that I get is if people or pets can eat them. And yes, you can. They are quite delicious. I've had them a couple of different times. They taste basically like kind of nutty if you don't cook them anything. But if you cook them with something, they'll taste like rice or whatever it is that you kind of cook them up with, if you put soy sauce or whatever. I've had them in mulberry candy glaze. I've had them mixed with rice and tuna. They taste sort of like seafood. And because of that, we also throw out that if you are allergic to seafood, you should not consume cicadas. They have lived in the ground, so they can accumulate heavy metals and things that are in the soil. So you should consume them in moderation. Don't eat, 3 cicada whopper meals in a row every day for the next couple of months. Just do it a couple of times, but you will be fine, and so will your pets.